voice can break the dark. A single spark ignites the heart. But if we turn when justice calls, the chains we forge will bind us all. When truth is silence, when lies take hold, the cost is freedom, the soul grows cold. No one stands tall while another must fall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, defending every voice, defending every right. For the moment we falter, the moment we stall, we lose our own freedom when we let others fall. You can't stand free while others kneel. When justice fades, it's freedom they steal. An innocent condemned, a crime unspoken, and with it the bond of liberty is broken. No tyrant rules without our consent. Oppression thrives where silence is spent. Stand for the weak, the silence is small, or freedom will crumble for us all. We're mavericks of freedom, guardians of the light, fighting for the truth, for what is just and right. For the rights of one are the rights of all. We rise or we fall by answering the call. Even those we may oppose deserve the rights we all uphold. For if we deny them what is fair, we build our own prison in despair. The fight's not easy, it never will be, but justice for one is the key to be free. We stand as mavericks, together we strive, defending the rights that keep freedom alive. We're mavericks of freedom, rebels in the fight, upholding every truth, protecting every right. When one is oppressed, we're all in the thrall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all. So take a stand, let your courage rise. Defend the truth, don't compromise. For the soul of the world, the writing's on the wall. Freedom for one depends on freedom for all.
Greetings, Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening, Mavericks. Welcome back. Tonight, a special broadcast. We're taking a look at the secret plan, the secret 51st state plan. It's been in the works for a long time. Some people seem to think Donald Trump just came up with this idea off the top of his head one day in an impromptu comment made during that visit to Mar-a-Lago by Justin Trudeau, where Trump called Trudeau the governor. But tonight we're going to show you that this idea is a seed that was planted a long time ago. There's a lot of people involved, Canadians, Americans, but the seed, it seems, may have come from a retired general who was on this program just about a week ago. And his interview here led me to give this more thought and also to reach out and ask some other people to take a look at this, because the ramifications of the things that he said on this program a week ago and the things that he has said in the past, the things that he continues to say on other programs, in collaboration with others amount to what some people might even call a conspiracy to overthrow the Canadian government. I'm not exaggerating. It really comes down to that. And it's something that has been in the works for a long time. And yet, as serious as that sounds, as serious as this is, with tentacles that reach potentially all the way into the White House and the Oval Office, people seem numb to all of this, as though maybe there's no real threat. They're not really taking it seriously. And yet it is a very real, serious thing, and we'll lay that out for you tonight when our special guest Mike Pekarik joins us on the broadcast right after this.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV.
The entire world is watching.
On social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
Okay, let's get right to it. And let's bring our guest contributor in tonight. Mike Pekarik returns. How are you, sir?
I'm all right. How are you tonight?
I'm just fine, and thank you so much for joining me here tonight. I'm grateful because I reached out to you with this because you have a background in the U.S. military. I think you'll understand many aspects of this better than I can because we have questions tonight of ethics, even legal questions. International law comes into play here. Respect or maybe even a disregard for the sovereignty of countries, what kind of role a retired general and other generals might be playing in what might amount to an international scandal between Canada and the United States at a time when your president, Donald J. Trump, is talking about annexing Canada, potentially turning us into the 51st state. And the information we have here tonight will show that this is a very real thing that has been in the works for quite some time. And in addition to that, this will be of a real interest to our viewers. It links back to the Freedom Convoy in Canada of 2022 in a way that shows that there was an attempt, at least on some level, to hijack the convoy and use it for purposes beyond what the stated intent was, which was to protest pandemic mandates and lockdowns, etc. That there was a real movement there to destabilize our government. We have documents, we have the plan in the words of the general himself tonight and from some of those who have been collaborating with him. Now, you've been digging into this, Mike, and maybe I'll throw it over to you to just get your thoughts, your opening thoughts on this, and your thoughts about General Paul Vallely, or Vallely.
Yeah, so I was struggling with the pronunciation as well. I once read pithy little phrase that never get on somebody's case. If they mispronounce a word, that means they learned it by reading it. So sorry, General, if I mispronounce your name. I believe he confirmed that it was Vallely.
Yeah, Valley, Valley. I apologize as well.
Yeah, for a guy with a name of an Eastern European name of Pekaric, where the second syllable is emphasized, I still do the American thing where I default to the first syllable because that's a very Western European thing to do. So Vallely is my default, and if that's wrong, I'm sorry. Just like people saying Pekaric is wrong, and sorry. Yeah, so I'm a little bit out of a loss because this the studying that I did on this guy, he's been around for a while. Obviously, he's 85 years old. He retired from the Air Force in 1991. So what is that, 34 years ago? And in 1991, that was after a 30-year career. He signed up in 61. So he saw a good bit of time, but he, in many ways, is a product of his age, in like we all are, to a certain extent. And a lot of his rhetoric that I've heard reflects that. So he retired right at the end of the Cold War. I have a sibling that served in that period that started spouting a lot of the same things. My biggest beef with him is he's going after. So in the United States, in the American Civil War, prior to the American Civil War, the United States military really wasn't that big to be. First off, I think when South Carolina seceded in 1861, there was a total of 17,000 people in the United States military. So it was tiny. But the Civil War got us into, after the Civil War, we added to the military oath, instead of all enemies, against all enemies, it was against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And General Vallely's service between 61 and 91 encompassed Vietnam and then the end of the Cold War, and some turbulent times in the United States domestically. He has expressed the opinion that I've heard from other people of his political persuasion that his political opponents domestically are domestic enemies. And he's been coming at this way for 30-something years. Which, to me, since I disagree with him politically, I would ask the general if me as his domestic political opponent in the civilian realm, but a 22-year Air Force veteran myself, am I his enemy? Am I a domestic enemy?
Well, and if I may, because I think we're getting into details, and we really kind of need to hit the headline here.
Oh, I'm sorry. So
that and maybe what I can do is set this up.
Sure.
What we have here is a general who's still actively involved today, even though he's 85. He is running an organization that still gathers intelligence internationally. He's got a network of intelligence people working. He has Stand Up America US, I believe it's called. We'll go to the website to confirm that in a moment. He advises Donald Trump, has been an advisor to Donald Trump regularly since the beginning of his political career, endorsed Donald Trump. Donald Trump accepted his endorsement, so he absolutely does have connections to the president.
His connections to Donald Trump go back to the Tea Party years and the birtherism when Donald Trump first entered the American political fray.
And the real issue here tonight, which is something that came to light in my interview with him about a week ago, which it was concern at the time. Now, as I review this and I've reached out to people, this is a very, very serious matter in my view, potentially, because during this is where it starts. He has been talking about Canada and other countries, but especially Canada, as a national security risk for quite some time. And during the Freedom Convoy, this is really where the rubber hits the road. He was in direct contact from his home base in Montana as a retired general, but I would say, but still active politically and connected to the Trump campaign and the Trump organization during the Freedom Convoy. He was also in direct contact with organizers of the Freedom Convoy in Ottawa at that time, and was actually providing advice and direction to some of these Freedom Convoy organizers. So you've got a retired, well, he's not just retired, he's active, and he has an arms company, a gun company that he started. He has intelligence networks that he's acknowledged. On his website, it indicates that they provide intelligence to the Department of Defense, to the FBI, to the CIA, and we also found out last week, just from the interview, which I didn't really think would go down that road so much, he was advising one of the Freedom Convoy groups, because there were many groups, but one of the groups that was up there, one of the organizing groups, which had the intent of disrupting or maybe even overthrowing the government. And then while he was advising them, he was providing direct information back to Donald Trump in real time. So you've got this information conduit from the convoy to this general back to Donald Trump. That's what has been said on this program, on other programs, by the general himself, by collaborators, people that he's been appearing on live streams with regularly for many months, if not years, talking about this. It's a plan that also interconnects with another plan that he authored called Operation Sinaloa, which has, for even during the last Trump administration, was focused on the drug cartels in Mexico, where we know that there was a proposal which was not acted upon because some people in the Trump administration stopped this, where he wanted to go in and bomb in Mexico drug cartels, but other people told Trump that he couldn't do it. But this is where these ideas came from. He's also so connected to Trump that we're told he has said that he's the guy who came up with the whole phrase, the marketing label, America First. In addition to that, his whole career has been focused on psychological warfare, psyops, and basically military coups around the world. That's his area of specialty, and he spoke to us about that on our program as well. In fact, he wrote the darn book on it. He's written several books, and there's also a proposal that he wrote, called Mind Wars, that he sent to the Pentagon, which is all about how to run a modern psychological operation. In addition to that, we've got links, and we've got him talking about how Q operates, QAnon, and he's also, which talks about this network of generals, military, high-ranking military officials who have been sort of always working in the background through QAnon. And people think it's crazy, but if you look at what the general is involved with, he has been working with organizations where there are groups of mostly retired, high-ranking military officials, especially generals, who are part of organizations that have been in opposition to, certainly in opposition to the Biden administration, very loyal to President Trump, and it appears as though even when Trump was out of office, they were very active in providing intelligence to Trump, almost acting like a shadow military organization of some kind in the shadows to President Trump. And it looks like they may have been involved in some sort of operation. What exactly it is, we're not sure. But because of his ties to QAnon, his endorsement of QAnon, the involvement of other generals like General Michael Flynn in QAnon, you can see the dots interconnecting here. But the biggest problem with all of this was his direction of the Freedom Convoy, at least one of the groups within that convoy in 2022, where he's telling them where to send their trucks, advising them on how to conduct their affairs, giving them basically strategic advice from a U.S. general to what was the largest political protest of its type. There are many things are true at the same time with that convoy. Yes, it was peaceful on one level. Yes, it was just ordinary Canadians coming up by the thousands to protest the mandates. But we also know that there were other groups in there who were bad actors, bad apples, that almost spoiled the whole bunch. This particular group, and we'll get into the details on this tonight, this particular group has been working for a long time to destabilize the Canadian government, undermine it. And we have documents. Now, this is the other fly in the ointment. It extends well beyond the convoy. This has been an ongoing effort even since then, and even before then. And it continues to this day, this effort to destabilize the government. And now Trump is back in the White House. This general still has connections to Trump and the Trump administration. And he signed recently just documents as recently as October of this year, which basically call for the overthrow of the Canadian government. And he's mentioned repeatedly by people who keep trying to resurrect and recreate the convoy of 2022. And we've seen repeated efforts with trucks actually on the road in some cases, heading to the capital of Canada to try to recreate that protest. Only it's not the peaceful version. We've got our secret recording that we released last week showing that some of these people do want to get violent, and they talk about it in some detail, and they mention his name specifically, which he says it's not him, but because he's kind of connected to these groups, they look at what he's been advocating for, what he's been calling for, which is a 51st state. He even published on his Substack just maybe a month ago an article about why Canada should become the 51st state, and calls into question the legitimacy of our government repeatedly, and says that Canada is really a U.S. orphan.
Which doesn't make any sense. But
no, but in his mind it does. So a lot of this is crazy stuff, which is sort of what they use as, it seems like they're using this as a cloak, right? So that people don't pay attention to them, where they appear to be nuts, and some of the people involved are. So the authorities kind of dismiss them as not being a real threat. But this is actually a real threat. And we can explain this in more detail, but this is all real. Where I've been kind of like ignoring a lot of it, dismissing a lot of it. Most sane people look at a lot of this and they think, just a bunch of crazy people, don't pay any attention. That's the problem. People haven't been paying attention, and now the lunatics are running the asylum.
Yep. Because that's what happened here.
That's what I'm talking about, right? You've got people in the White House now who are directly connected to this. And I'm sorry, a lot of this is just bat crap crazy. Yeah. But they're making it a reality, which is part of what General Vallely is all about. Running these psyops, it's about challenging people's perceptions of reality to the point where and he said this to me himself, he said, the key to everything is convincing Canadians that their country isn't real. He said that to me.
Well, it was funny because he was trying to talk out of both sides of his mouth, pretending that he was only dealing in facts. But then later on in your interview, he admitted that he was creating those facts, which is Orwellian doublespeak, where happy is sad and sad is happy and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
His words in that PSYOP manual, let's see, where was it? The advantage of mind war psyops is that it conducts wars in non-lethal, non-injurious, and non-destructive ways. Essentially, you overwhelm your enemy with argument, not facts. You seize control of all of the means by which his government and populace process information to make up their minds. And you adjust it so that those minds are made up as you desire. Everyone is happy, no one gets hurt or killed, and nothing is destroyed, except, of course, independence and freedom and sovereignty.
And in some cases, people's sanity.
Yeah. So we're walking a really weird part of history right now, because the general is a retired general. There's some question on, because he keeps using his rank and his military connection. And there's legal arguments in the United States that when you do that, because you're retired, you're a private citizen, but I don't use my rank. I'm a private citizen. Why do you care about my rank, But he throws his around. And there is an argument to be made that once you become a general officer, or a flag officer, that would include an admiral in the Navy, you have in some ways fewer rights than even the rest of us. So service in the military in the United States anyway, the word service is not lightly chosen. In many ways, you're a servant. While you're in the military, you are under a far more strict legal code. It is part of the United States law that Congress passes. It's under Title 10 of the United States Code of Law, but it is only applies to the military. It's the Uniform Code of Military Justice. The one question and the one really strange ground that we're on right now is that Article 134 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice prohibits, and this is a very broad term, the question is, what does it mean? It prohibits people bringing discredit upon the service that they serve. And so the general doing these things that, attacking political enemies using his rank, the United States, out of an abundance of caution, hasn't really taken people to task for this because they're retired. They're still using their rank. Does it bring discredit to the service? In some extreme cases, people have been brought back, but not necessarily for political action. Now, the general here, if what you're saying is true, and as a private citizen using his military rank is trying to be subversive and incite insurrection or whatever he's trying to do in a allied nation, then does that bring discredit upon the United States military? And is he still subject to the Uniform Code of Military Justice? I'm not going to tell you there's an easy answer to those questions. I can tell you what I think is that even retired military folk have to be careful. And the higher rank that you are, the more careful you have to be. And then if you start using your rank or appearing in uniform and doing these things, then it's a big problem.
Well, let's bring a little clip up from his appearance on this program about a week ago so he can speak a little bit for himself. And I have invited him to come back on the program. I was having some correspondence with him for a short time after, but he hasn't responded to my most recent emails. I've also reached out to some other people who have been collaborating with him to invite them on the program. They have not responded to any of my calls. So we'll see where that goes. Maybe they'll come on another night. But I've been trying to reach them for days, and they're not responding. Now, here's General Vallely on our program talking. I believe this is the clip where he's talking about why Canada maybe should become the 51st state.
Some people I just pulled it out of his hat. No, he doesn't.
Hang on. Let me get this to the right speed for you.
He's thought about it before.
Mm-hmm. So
that's why he's so successful.
Yeah. So, with regard to your article on Substack again, how do you view Canada? Because you said that some people don't view Canada as a real country, and I run into people like that, and I see that you kind of subscribe to that sort of thinking. Can you elaborate a bit on that? And is that why you think that it? I think from your point of view, it's like Canada should become part of America again, not that it's would become a part of America for the first time. Can you elaborate on that?
I think it would strengthen the continent from a national security standpoint.
Yeah.
For farming, for mining, I think some better relationship with Canada would be very positive for both countries.
Okay.
And especially if we don't know what's going to happen in the future with China. Are they going to attack? They're planning an attack on Taiwan. Are they going to try to attack us and Canada? Mm-hmm. Chinese are very smart. They're very clever. That's why there's a Belt Road Initiative has gone all the way across the plains of Asia, into the Middle East, into Africa, Central and South America, into Vancouver, into the United States, San Francisco, very influential in San Francisco, which has a large Chinese population.
I know that there is a lot of concern about drug trafficking,
Right.
smuggling, precursors for fentanyl coming into Canada from China, also coming into Canada from the United States, through Mexico up into the U.S. and then into Canada. Peter Navarro just a week ago indicated there are concerns on the U.S. side about Mexican drug cartels up here on the Canadian side of the border. You must know something about that, given that you have some feelers out there on that. Can you talk about it?
There are. They're in your cities. They're in Vancouver. They're in Calgary, probably Quebec. That's what they do. They infiltrate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, behind every bush. As I've been listening, this is where Trump's justification for whatever it is he wants to do is coming from. This whole, you better clean up that drug problem and shut down your border. This is where it's all coming from. Is from like these kinds of people, or from maybe just from him. This is where it's all coming from. And when I've gone back and I've been listening to all of this, no real numbers, no real evidence. It's just he's just like, you got a big problem. Well, how big is it? Well, it's just really big. It's terrible. The Chinese are everywhere. They've infiltrated your old country. I had a conversation with him about Chinese influence, whatever. He thinks that the Chinese have taken over the whole banking system. He thinks that they own all the real estate in Vancouver. He's just a little bit delusional. We have some issues, but he doesn't have a proper perspective on this. It's like blown right out of proportion in his mind. Like, we've got a problem, but they don't own everything. We have new laws in place to deal with foreign investment and to deal with money laundering. But in his mind, it's time to invade.
Well, and that's when I started going into, okay, what generation does this general come from? His experiences in Vietnam, 70s, and the end of the Cold War, that there was a strong contingent of ultra right-wing military veterans that came out of all of that in the United States. And it was all sorts of different things piling together. And what you hear coming out of the General Vallely's mouth is more or less standard fare from this group. And so it's not even really new. His connection to Trump is at least back to 14, 13, or 12, 2012, 2013, 2014, somewhere in there. Mm-hmm. But this sort of activism, including his activism, dips back into the 90s and is very much post-Vietnam, we were betrayed kind of stuff. And so that's where he's coming from. It's very behind every bush, like you just said. I tried to look up some of his assertions. I couldn't find anything what he was talking about in San Francisco. And in fact, there's a couple of places that, because this was around in the Tea Party land and the QAnon land, and then the January 6th militias and all that kind of stuff, they assert, they just don't have evidence. And so it doesn't help. I mean, I can fall back. Christopher Hitchens had a phrase that's since been termed Hitchens' razor, that which is asserted without evidence can be, dismissed without evidence. So he's making a lot of assertions; they're just not supported.
Yeah.
So there's Chinese investment worldwide. Some of it's private citizens, some of it's the government. The Belt and Road Initiative is real. Mainly, it's trying to influence third world nations, Southern Hemisphere nations for the most part. I could find no evidence of Belt and Road in San Francisco, none at all.
Look, I mean, people are pointing to the TD Bank lawsuit, where TD Bank was fined billions of dollars for not having strict enough protocols to catch Chinese or drug money laundering. But it wasn't just on the Canadian side. Those were TD Bank branches in the United States that were involved in that. And then it did link back up to Montreal, or to Vancouver, where there has been money laundering going on in the real estate market as well. Those are real issues. Those are real things. But there's perspective on this. And now Trump is demanding that, we clean up our border, we secure our border, when it's really like the issue is like what's going into the United States. We have way more of it coming into Canada from the US than goes back. And only 42 pounds was found in, I think, 2023, which was the last
fentanyl.
The fentanyl,
Fentanyl,
right?
Yeah.
42 pounds. And then I'll tell you, some of this was theater. The Ontario government, provincial government in Canada, just in the province of Ontario, invested $143 million to respond to Trump's demands that we do something on the border. They don't want the tariffs, so they gave the cops $143 billion in border security there, and they did. They went out and they busted a fentanyl operation, and they also seized, I think it was 43 pounds about a week ago. And then they had a big news conference to show, look, Donald, we're doing something, but it's not going to matter how much fentanyl is. In fact, the more that is done and the more that they find, the worse it's going to get, because he's just going to say, look, this just proves you've got a big problem and you should have been doing more. And there was an editorial in the by Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilly, who asserted exactly that after that drug bust. See, we've got a bigger problem than anybody realized. The problem hasn't been cleaned up. It's not enough. It's never going to be enough. That's why the tariffs related to fentanyl are still coming in March 4th on schedule. And that's why this is just a trap. It's an unsolvable problem, a problem for which there is no real solution, because it's like the war on drugs. It's the war on prohibition. You can't really get rid of it. So
that's where I was going to go with that, because it's so oddly framed where, yes, fentanyl's a problem. I don't want to minimize that at all. It is killing people. There are certain places where it's coming in from, but you can maybe go after the supply. But it's like what you said with the war on drugs and with prohibition back in the day. As long as you have people that want to buy it, then somebody's going to figure out a way to make it and sell it. And so if you're only going after the current suppliers, then you're never going to solve it.
And look, this stuff with the general, who has been an advisor to Trump and has been putting a lot of these ideas directly into his head with actual proposals, including a plan called Operation Sinaloa, which involved actually going into Mexico, into sovereign Mexican territory with U.S. troops to set up a 20-mile no-go zone and wiping out the Mexican drug cartels using the U.S. military, which he was told by other military officials in the United States, no, we can't do that because it really needs to be a police operation in Mexico. It's you can't do that. And he's like, well, why not? It's just like Vietnam, and we do all these other things. And that's what he said on another podcast. Here he is back as far as 2021, talking about exactly this plan. And even then, he's talking about Canada because in his mind, Canada is part of this huge fentanyl problem. He's on a podcast called.
I watched too much of this one.
Yeah, his glory. So I mean,
we point out another thing. We submitted a border plan to the Pentagon, for example, as a major threat to the United States, and we actually submitted that in 2017 to President Trump, but nothing was done to neutralize and take out the cartels. And so we're saying we need cross-border operations, just like we've done in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Here we have the cartels running a major corporate global entity down there, working with the Chinese Communist Party for sure. We know that. And allowing these coyotes in that to be paid to migrate all of these people from Central America, basically in Mexico and other 58 other countries, by the way, across our borders illegally. And so what we've recommended is a 20-kilometer no-go zone south of the U.S.-Mexican border along Mexico and Arizona, New Mexico, California, and Texas. And that we allocate a headquarters commanded by a 2-star general that will use special operations intel to take out and neutralize the cartels. We can take the cartels down in 7 days with a military operation, and also with Treasury and so on, shutting down the financial transfers of money. But a lot of people don't realize that the cartels are responsible for killing more Americans than we've lost in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And if you add on the hundreds of thousands that we've lost through drug deaths in America, fentanyl, meth, and so on. And that's the enemy that's below us. Now, a lot of people don't understand also the effect they're having through Vancouver, British Columbia into Canada. Tremendous amount of money has flowed out of Shanghai and the financial institutions, buying up acreage and defunct bankrupt companies in Canada that control many natural resources and minerals. So a lot's going on up in Canada as well. And then, of course, we have China. They're running the Panama Canal, basically.
Yeah.
And they say there's almost 100,000 down there in the Panama Canal area. I don't have a count on that. But we're being
Wow, he rolled up a whole bunch of stuff into one subject, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
I didn't watch that particular interview. I have a hard time stomaching that podcast. Sorry, I had very limited access to that one, and it was still too much. The His Glory podcast.
Hang on here a second.
That's all right.
Okay, I'm still playing in my head because I had to stop the clip.
Sure.
And I know I'm not looking in the chat, but I know some people are going to be saying, "But Sam Cooper, that journalist in Canada, he did all this." There's a guy out there right now who's been doing a bunch of stories about all of this. But I'll tell you this: Mr. Cooper has a $15 million defamation lawsuit hanging over his head, which is from when he was working at Global News in Canada. And then when that lawsuit was levied against him, he left Global News. We'll say he left because, they're not coming out and saying exactly why, but it's pretty clear why he had to leave Global News. The lawsuit is still pending because he was naming some Canadian politicians, I think, and connecting or some people from a Chinese diaspora community and connecting them to drugs. And I don't know all the details of the case, but that's where that's gone, is a $15 million defamation lawsuit. It's still unsettled, and he's still out there publishing these articles. There's a lot more going on there than meets the eye, I'm sure. And people have tried to get me to bite on that stuff, and I'm like, I'm looking at it and I'm saying, well, where's the proof, first of all? And secondly, there isn't really much actual proof in any of the stuff I've seen anyway, that people are saying he's got the receipts. Well, you show me the receipts, because I'm not seeing them, and I'm not getting my ass sued for $15 million by dragging some people's names through the mud. Not to say there isn't a problem, but again, let's keep it in perspective. And why are all these stories coming out right now, just in this time, when we've got all the 51st state stuff going on, and it's all connected directly to the issue of drugs at the border and all of this stuff, and all of his reports coming out right now? I've got some, my radar is up. Let's just put it that way.
Well, and that, man, there's so much in the interview that you did with the general and what you just played. You could just take it apart and dissect it, because he states a lot of things, but he rolls a lot of things together that don't make any sense. And in some ways break various laws. So the whole thing about using the military in Mexico, did the Mexican government give us permission to this? Are we invading a neighboring nation with our military? What's going on there? It would be one thing if, in cooperation with the Mexican government, we go after the cartels. I'm not going to say military is the right choice there. We have a certain skill set that generally doesn't include police work, but if you want to hammer some nails, then that's within our purview. Maybe the FBI would be important here, but the government of Mexico would be indispensable, because without declaring war and invading a neighboring nation, I don't see how that's going to happen. The other part of that was he very silently, I don't know if adroitly is the right word, but he silently rolled drug cartels and fentanyl and the Chinese influence operation into the larger immigration thing, which they're not connected, except for maybe tangentially or in very small bits. If you had like Venn diagrams, maybe they overlap on a little bit of a sliver there. And he was talking about all these nations sending immigrants to the United States, but a lot of these immigrants, they fall under the category of asylum because they're coming from places, broken nations like Venezuela and Nicaragua, places where you can't trust the police, you can't trust the government, you can't trust the schools, you can't trust anyone because it got destroyed. And so they can't live there safely for this, that, or the other reason. There are international treaties that the United States signed, and when the United States signs and ratifies a treaty, under the U.S. Constitution, that becomes U.S. law. So if somebody is seeking refugee or asylum status, it is U.S. law governing that. And so if you want to completely cut off immigration, and this rolls back into something Trump's done in the last few days, trying to halt the refugee and the asylum system, you're literally breaking U.S. law. So there's all sorts of crazy stuff that's rolled into that one statement, and it's like, how do you tease all of that apart? Because it's
and well, I mean, it gets worse. It gets worse.
And
let me come back to the convoy, okay? And this, I take no joy in this, because on many levels, the Freedom Convoy, as many people in our Maverick family here will attest to, it was on many levels a very peaceful Canadian kind of expression of free speech, right? And in many respects, very, very peaceful. I get all of that, but more than one thing can be true at the same time.
Yeah.
And that is the case here, because during the convoy, there were people there who were bad apples. And one of those people that was of extreme concern to the government was a man by the name of Norm Traversy, who is a common law, sovereign citizen, a pseudo-law guru, we'll call him, who spins up kind of fake legal narratives, and is constantly challenging exactly what General Vallely, through his mind war, psyop strategies, would employ, which is to challenge whether Canada is even a real country. And he's constantly doing this. He's going to court all the time I would call him a court jester, where he's using fake legal arguments. Again, not with facts. He's not there to actually win a legal argument. He's just there to argue and throw into question for people whether Canada really exists. So he was at the convoy, and he says he was one of the main organizers. And this is Norm Traversy, who says that he was in direct communication with General Vallely, who was at his home base in Montana, providing him with direction for the trucks and the convoy participants. Or not all of them, but certainly a lot of the trucks. Not to say they took all of the general's advice, but he was providing strategic advice from Montana to this man who says he was there to set the whole thing up.
I and some other people in Ottawa were the reception committee. I live in Ottawa. I've got a friend who owns a boutique hotel, a 24-room hotel, and she booked rooms for only people that knew me. And we ran that convoy from this hotel in downtown Ottawa. A lot of the people helping were ex-military and ex-police.
His words, and yeah, he was definitely there. Didn't get along with some of the people who were involved with the convoy. The truth of the matter is there were a bunch of different groups. I'd say in some cases, in a lot, not always in alignment with each other, but Norm Traversy had a group. And as a result, people can't understand why the federal government did what it did. I'm going to say to you tonight, folks, and I was kind of duped by this myself for a long time because I just couldn't see it. Why did the federal government bring in the Emergencies Act? Because they said that there were people there who wanted to overthrow the government. Now, I know that people are laughing because they had bouncy castles and they were playing road hockey there, but there were also people there who were hiding behind, I would say, the human shields. They were exploiting ordinary Canadians who were convinced to come out by the thousands, and they were hiding what people like Norm Traversy and others were actually doing behind the scenes.
It goes right up with what Vallely stated that I read earlier in the show, where he's trying to create a situation that people think looks innocent, but it's not, because the intent of creating that situation is not innocent. But yeah, so I mean, and nations have a right to defend their sovereignty. That's part of the basic UN Charter. And so the Canadian government, if they saw a threat to the Canadian government, then it is actually their legal right to defend themselves.
Absolutely. And on some level, the Canadian intelligence did see a threat, but it was never fully articulated. Nevertheless, the leaders of the major political parties, including Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau, they were briefed on this. And I think there was actually more than one threat, but here's Jagmeet Singh talking about it.
The Emergencies Act was invoked, that represented a failure. It represented a failure on a number of fronts. A failure on all levels of government to respond to the serious problem of the convoy. It meant that the Prime Minister didn't take it seriously. The premier certainly didn't take it seriously. Doug Ford ignored it entirely. And the mayor of Ottawa ignored the seriousness of the problem. And the problem was really clear. We had citizens that were being harassed and intimidated, food banks where staff were being harassed. This was an ongoing thing, not one-off scenarios. We had people that were wearing masks were being intimidated and harassed in the streets. People faced the worst lockdowns that they'd ever experienced throughout the pandemic in Ottawa. The citizens faced the worst of it because of the convoy. Businesses were shut down. Kids were struggling to go to school. People couldn't sleep at night. It was pretty horrible. And given how bad things were and how people were being targeted, all levels of government failed the people of Ottawa and also failed workers. Thousands of workers
I'm not sure if this is the clip I was looking for, but it's still relevant.
And none of this was taken seriously. There was a failure of policing. It's very clear that all levels of policing also failed to take this seriously. It should never have got to this point. And so that's why I think that the work of the commission is so important to identify
He's talking about
how we can prevent
an inquiry that
happening,
took place
because
afterward.
it was as a result of all those levels of failure that we had to invoke the Emergencies Act, and that it was in no way a success. It was an example of the serious failures that occurred to get us to that point. So I'm hoping the commission will highlight how we can have.
That was not really the clip that I was looking for.
Now, was that talking about the later commission that looked into the Canadian government's response to the convoy? Is that what he was talking about?
Yeah, if the government ever uses the Emergencies Act, they are after using it, they are required by law to have a public inquiry to review everything. It's essentially like the equivalent of an inquest, not to find guilt or throw anybody in jail or anything like. It's to determine what went right, what went wrong, whether it was justified.
Inquiry. Right. That happens in the United States too. Some of the famous ones there was one after Pearl Harbor. There was the JFK one. There was some Nixon inquiries. Iran-Contra. I mean, just name a scandal. There was almost certainly a congressional inquiry.
And here's Jagmeet Singh acknowledging.
But the organizers, the central organizers, made it very clear what their goal was. Their goal was to overthrow the government. They didn't hide that. They stated it very boldly on a website. They've repeated it in numerous press conferences. They wanted to overthrow a democratically elected government with a committee of their own choosing. I mean, it was very clear what their goal was. And the fact that policing and other levels, other security forces were colluding with these folks is deeply concerning. Like, their goal was not an innocuous goal. Their goal was to overthrow government.
So
I'll tell you that Vallely has a history of this.
Can you elaborate?
So the ones that I'm most familiar with started in the Tea Party, President Obama era, and Vallely was, I can't remember the specific lieutenant colonel's name. It really doesn't matter. You can Google it if you want. There was a lieutenant colonel in the United States military who, during President Obama's administration, had refused deployment orders. I'd like to say to Afghanistan. Refusing legal orders in the U.S. military is really bad juju. That can get you kicked out and put in prison, and it's just bad. Questioning the legality of orders is protected to a certain amount, but refusing a legal order is a big problem. And a simple order to deploy during a time of war, that involves things like cowardice in the face of the enemy and basically things that can carry some very serious consequences. Paul Vallely went to this person's defense because Vallely publicly, I know you have a theory that maybe he doesn't actually agree with some of the things he said, but I actually do think he believed that President Obama was not a legitimate president, that he had all sorts of, where's the birth certificate? And then after the birth certificates came out, he's like, that wasn't a real birth certificate. And you're like, what do you want? But this was refusal. He was supporting this guy's refusal of orders. So this happened several times. Birtherism, he was a big part of. There was a video that seems to be scrubbed from every place that I've looked for it. Like the article, and they say, this is what he said. And then on the video, it's like, this content's been removed. I'm like, not sure how that happened, but he offered to lead a military coup against Obama back during the Tea Party movement, 2012, 2013, 2014. This is not new for him.
Yeah. And during the convoy, as I indicated, he was apparently, and he said this himself, in contact with President Trump and with Norm Traversy and with other organizers. He also has indicated that he was speaking regularly with Pat King, who is still serving house arrest for his participation in the convoy. What he was doing exactly with Pat King, I am not sure. I don't really mean to implicate Pat King or get him into any more trouble than he's already been in, and I hope that he just serves his time or in house arrest and is done with all of the problems that he's had, and we'll see what happens there. He's expressed remorse, I guess, but General Vallely was operating in the shadows the entire time, using ordinary Canadians, including kids, as basically a cloak, human shields to hide behind so that people wouldn't realize or know what it was that he was kind of doing with Norm Traversy, who acknowledges right here that, yeah, he was feeding information back to Donald Trump.
And he is an advisor to President Trump. So he's kind of our way to contact Trump. Cool. I got an email from Donald Trump in 2020 thanking me. So we've been in touch during the convoy. I was one of the organizers, and every evening I would phone General Vallely, and he had a map of Ottawa on his wall. He's in Montana. And he would then report to President Trump. And he would also give me assignments like, go to Waverly Street and do this, or tell those guys not to do that, or whatever.
Wow.
and the general is on with Norm regularly. They collaborate, they publish things together. These guys are not strangers, they're friends. There it is.
This is one example of this type of action. So the general is not the only person that's involved in this sort of operation. We've seen this since the Russians have been doing this, the Chinese have been doing this. Whether the general's involved with those two nations, I haven't been able to determine, but it's possible he's just doing it on his own with Trump.
But he's not. And that much is clear because he's also on other on these podcasts with other generals. General McInerney. He's been on podcasts with General Flynn.
So
these guys all know each other, and they know what the plans are, and they collaborate and talk.
And Flynn is actually on the payroll of the Kremlin, or at least he has been in the past, and failed to mention that pertinent fact.
Right.
And there's certain rules about retired generals working for foreign nations, and him failing to report that he was on the payroll of both the Kremlin and RT, which is the propaganda mouthpiece of the Kremlin. This is General Flynn.
And I can tell you that General Vallely also has been a somewhat regular contributor to RT.
Oh, well, then there you go. So he's acting as a mouthpiece for the Kremlin as well. But this sort of operation is because they don't have to protect their own freedoms. They're not necessarily answerable to their own public, any sort of legal system. But in the West, where we have certain freedom of the press, certain freedom of assembly, certain freedom of petition, free association, that kind of stuff. Those are the American versions wrapped up in the First Amendment that are protected, and for good reason. So a Western government that takes the freedoms seriously, when a protest happens, And what you were saying, they were using the certain fronts, the peaceful front and the bouncy castles, and the people that really didn't actually mean any harm that were there.
Yeah.
That this kind of operation is going to use that sort of thing as a cover. It's using our strengths and twisting them into a weakness. And so I can understand if the Canadian government was a bit slow to respond, because your citizens have a right to protest. They do. What there is no right for is for foreign nationals to come and organize an insurrection, or a retired U.S. military general to start ordering, you do this, you do that, which is not protest anymore. Now you're talking about a program and an intent to undermine the legitimacy of a nation.
Oh yeah, and how is the Canadian government supposed to respond to something like that? You have, if they were entirely aware of this, and we have pretty good intelligence up here, I would be very surprised if they didn't know.
You're part of Five Eyes.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So they probably knew all of this. But what if you're the prime minister, or even the head of the RCMP or CSIS in Canada? What are you going to do? You're going to come out and say, yeah, the superpower that is right next door? Well, this general who still provides intelligence to the CIA, FBI, and the Department of Defense, and has direct ties to former President Trump, former then, and he's down there causing problems and wants to overthrow our government. No, it becomes an international incident. It's a catastrophe diplomatically for Canada. It opens a huge can of worms. No, I think that the government, if they knew, and I'm pretty sure they did, they're probably not even going to acknowledge it if they can just tamp it out and push it aside, so that we don't have to deal with the diplomatic fallout from it, especially since Trump is not in office anymore, and it would possibly even inflame things on your side of the border.
So it's, I mean, the United States were dealing with this as well, and we failed to punish certain egregious law breaking, and now we kind of effed around on that. Now we're in the find out stage, but it does give you, if the Canadian government, we're speculating a little bit, but if the Canadian government decided not to necessarily act, or act forcefully, or act publicly, then it is a little bit of a window on how a hostile foreign nation doing influence operations inside of your nation, hostile, undermining, they're not friendly in the remotest sense. So this gives you a window on the Russia-Ukraine situation, the Russia-Belarus situation, which people don't necessarily think of. Russia has a conflicted relationship, not just with Ukraine, but also with Belarus and with Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, to a very real extent. It's a little more public, but the Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. But it gives you a window on that, because now you've got Canadian experience with Trump, and I'm gonna have to go find some of those videos of Vallely on RT, because I'll save those and use them at some point.
Well, let's take a little break. We're going to come back in a moment. I've got more receipts. Okay, I have documents that Vallely has actually signed since the convoy, which show that all of this stuff continues even to this day, even as we are being threatened with annexation by now President again, Donald J. Trump.
And the parallels with the annexation of territories of Luhansk, Donetsk. And if they can try and make it look legit, like, we're going to hold some sort of referendum, and, Quebec's gone.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So let me just take a break, and we'll come back and we'll dig into this. I've got the documents. I've got more. I've got that secret audio recording. It's all coming up right after this.
Maverick News. The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals, defenders of individual rights and freedoms, credible, trusted, grounded in reality. Maverick News, Maverick News. Defending free speech, free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
Recording showing that some people keep trying to recreate the convoy, and in behind the scenes, General Vallely is active, or at least people believe he's active because they keep talking about him in these circles.
Well, he was on that call where, this guy told me to go here and do this, and so.
Yeah. So, in fact, I'll run this. We were given this recording this is from January, late January, where some people were on a during the convoy air time. The different groups would just communicate on social media, but since then, they now have, many of them, secure communication devices, I guess. In any event, one of these conversations recorded was sent over to me by an anonymous source, and they talk about Vallely in this conversation, where they're talking about a plan to return to Ottawa to overthrow the government. This was back in January as Trump was coming into office, and I'll just run this portion of the clip.
And is this General, is General Paul Vallely is involved?
Yes.
Okay. So it means that there's going to be an armed movement at the end of it.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
But you're not supposed to know that. You're very not supposed to do it to know that.
And his name keeps coming up and coming up and coming up in these meetings. You'll also hear him referenced on live streams, podcasts, in certain circles. He's very active. And I asked him about this when he was on the program.
Before I wasn't going to read the comments, but somebody did actually bring up a point where they're saying that some general in Montana is the problem, not domestic Canadian politics, or they were blaming Trudeau. That's missing the point. That's where I was saying that free nations, the people have a right to protest. They have a right to criticize their government. I'm going to criticize Trump all day long. I've got complaints about Biden, who I supported. I've got parts that certain issues I agree with Trump on, to be quite honest, and that's always surprises me when that happens. But when I was in the military, I served 4 presidents, 2 of each party. That's not the point. The point here is not domestic politics. It's not your disagreement with this, that, or the other leader. It's not who you're going to vote for. The issue is the basic sovereign integrity of the Canadian nation. And related topics, we could talk about the disruption inside the United States. You could talk about UK operations inside the United Kingdom, operations inside Germany and France. Pretty much every Western nation has hostile foreign influence operations going on right now. We're talking about the specific Canadian part of it. So this is not about domestic Canadian politics. This is about something a lot more existential than, I don't like Trudeau.
But they frame everything around F Trudeau. It's all Trudeau's, whatever it is, it's all Trudeau's fault. People just focus on that. The point here is that a retired general from the United States or an active general, doesn't matter, either or, and certainly a general who seems to be involved in some sort of military contracting and has active intelligence operations, which he talked about in his interview with me, in places like China, Canada, and other countries.
It's like a semi-private, but he also liaises with the U.S. government, at least according to him.
He's got no business. It's entirely inappropriate, possibly even illegal, completely unethical for him to be involved in a major protest viewed by the Canadian government and Canadian intelligence at the time as a threat to the government, a possible existential threat to the government at the time, because they saw it as some sort of an attempt to overthrow the government. They did see that element to it. Not to say that the other stuff isn't true. It is true. It was very peaceful and kids there, bouncy castles, all that's true. But so was this. And he had no business sticking his nose in there. This is an international scandal. In addition to that, if it's true, and it seems that there's credibility to the claims that he is making, that his collaborator, Norm Traversy, is making, that he was talking to Donald Trump, a former president who was working toward re-election and possibly even running some sort of a weird, shadowy, pseudo fake government
out of Mar-a-Lago,
out of Mar-a-Lago, while getting intelligence from people like Vallely, other generals as well. And there's a whole following of people, many of them QAnon supporters, who believe that he's still the president, who are being told he's still the president. And Vallely has direct connections to QAnon. It's just, he's got no business sticking his nose into Canadian affairs and fueling what is viewed. I remember thinking at the time, this almost looks like a color revolution unfolding, which is like an orchestrated, choreographed, massive demonstration to destabilize a government, which the CIA, FSB, other intelligence agencies, they do these kinds of things in countries sometimes. And that's what, on one level, it could look like. Certainly, Canadian intelligence was viewing it that way. And if he was talking to Donald Trump, then Trump is involved. And Trump should have said to him, if he's getting these reports on a daily basis from Vallely during the convoy, he should have said, hey, no, step back. You've got no business doing that. Now,
that's not Trump, though.
That's right. And then what did Trump do? He went and gave that speech where he praised the truckers, praised the convoy, about how, it was great. And I mean, he's free to do that, I suppose, but even
he praises militias and, the neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville and all sorts of stuff. So
he was, involved, but if he knew that there was this going on, and Trump has no business directing a political protest in Canada any more than our prime minister has any business telling a political protest in the United States what to do. It's an assault on our sovereignty. It was an attempt to destabilize and, yes, even possibly overthrow our government.
And for my money, Canada has a right to be mad about that. That's a legitimate beef.
There are many layers of complexity to this that raise a lot of really serious questions. Possible violations of international law. Ethical questions about whether the general was overstepping his bounds, whether he dishonored the U.S. military by doing this, whether he lived up to his oaths that he took when he became a general. And even in retirement, while he can be active politically somehow, but if he's also running a private company providing intelligence, even to a former president, and this is a mess. And it's certainly a diplomatic bomb waiting to go off, especially now when we've got Chrystia Freeland, Mark Carney, the other Liberal leadership hopefuls, the other leaders of the political parties, the Canadian government concerned about even possibly talking about being invaded by the United States, looking at this as a real threat. The annexation of Canada by the United States as being something that's a real possibility because the President of the United States has said he's not joking. So what are you supposed to do? Oh, even though he says he means it, we don't believe him. No, you better start taking it seriously.
Well, and we've made this mistake in the past because a lot of people try and excuse things that Trump says as, well, that's just a negotiating tactic, or he's just joking, or he's trying to own the libs. But words matter. You're the president of the United States. And the whole, I'm going to get this wrong, but the whole United Kingdom thing, won't somebody bring me the head of this meddlesome priest? Words matter. And even if you meant them in a passing fit of frustration, then you've got people underneath of you that took that seriously, so I can't, sorry, I'm still trying to dredge up was that Thomas Becket that I'm thinking of? Somebody bring me Henry V or Henry VIII or something like that. Somebody bring me the head of this troublesome priest. I'll look that up.
And his the articles that he's written, the books that he's written, the plan that he wrote for the Pentagon on how to run a psychological operation. He's the architect of what really amounts to Q. His whole plan basically lays out the blueprint for how to run that kind of operation, which he is involved with.
It was Henry II, King Henry II, and Thomas Becket. So I got the Thomas Becket part right.
So here he is on another live stream talking about how.
Oh, sorry. If people are not aware of this part of history, because I'm a complete nerd, Thomas Becket and Henry II, before he became King Henry II, were childhood and young adult friends. They partied together and all that kind of stuff. Thomas Becket was eventually chosen the Archbishop of Canterbury, I believe. He was appointed to that, and then Henry, of course, became King of England, and they had spats and disagreements. And after one thing, the king was just incredibly frustrated, and in a seemingly offhand comment said, "Won't somebody bring me the head of his troublesome priest?" Several of his knights went out and killed Thomas Becket. So words matter if you're the president.
They absolutely do. And here's Vallely talking about Q.
General Vallely, I have a question for you from our chat room on the American Arc Radio fan page. Do you know who the individual calling himself or themselves, if it's an organizational effort, Q? What do you know about that? Was that part of the PSYOP? What are you at liberty to say? Or is it a bunch of bunk?
Well, let me just tell you the QAnon's tied to information. And it comes out of a group called the Army of Northern Virginia. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, this is a group of military intelligence specialists of over 800 people that advise the president.
And so
the president doesn't have a lot of confidence in the CIA or even the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, as much anymore. So he relies on these real operators. Most of them are special operations type of people.
Yeah.
And so this is where Q picks up and gets some of their information, as I understand it. I know what they're looking at now, these alternate technologies of actually creating a separate internet. Okay?
Yep.
And this internet can't be compromised. It's so high tech. Of course, that's up to conjecture. But there's some technologies in clouding and all of this stuff that they're working on, and the Chinese have been working on it as well. But they're really looking alternatives to communicate worldwide with an alternative, or I'd say an alternative to our internet as we know it today. That's all I can tell you about that.
Fair enough, General. You've told me a lot in just what you said there. I appreciate that.
Well, I was in special operations for 20 years. I started out as a Army Ranger in special ops as a lieutenant. So I've been around the special ops field since 1962. But then I was appointed by President Reagan when he made special ops a separate service under a 4-star general. I helped organize and put that together. I was also the recommended First Assistant Secretary of Defense for Special Operations. But they ended up putting a politician in an ambassador who just came back from Cambodia. He only lasted about a year, but I went on to do other things. And last 20 years, I was responsible primarily when I was Deputy Commander, U.S. Army Pacific. I was responsible for the Special Ops operations over there, coordinating a lot of things.
Well,
PSYOPs is just a part of special operations.
Okay, listen, I'm not a Q guy, but a million people are asking me about Q, and that was what went the furthest with our last show. In the dying seconds that we have, can you say anything about Q being a white hat psychological operation?
Yeah, it is a white hat. It is a white information system that gathers information, intelligence, and puts it out through a distribution that's called QAnon. And as we can see, most of the reports that come in from Q are very valid. The only thing they've been off on a little bit is when Attorney General Barr is going to come out with indictments. And the word was put out for the Red October to be October 18th. Well, that's since been delayed. So we're all standing by for these indictments from the Attorney General of the United States regarding the Russian collusion and the silent coup against President Trump.
General Vallely, thank you so much for coming on the show. We've got to let you go. We have absolutely no time left. Well, there you go, everybody.
So we're way beyond the era of just dropping leaflets on an enemy. Right?
Yes.
And I'm submitting to the audience tonight that what was going on one level in Ottawa during the Freedom Convoy, even long before that, and it's still ongoing now, is a psychological warfare operation directed at Canada.
And he's been doing this in the States too. I go back to his Tea Party days where when in a similar time frame when he offered to lead a military force against Washington, D.C., he also called for the resignations of everybody, both GOP and Democrat at the time. So it included Speaker of the House Boehner, Senator, the senator from Kentucky, Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi. He basically wanted to replace the U.S. government with single-party rule because, like I said, the generation that he came from saw an entire half of the United States political landscape as a domestic enemy, rather than somebody to engage with on the political sphere. He viewed them as an enemy to eliminate and get out of power. So that's it. Like I said, this is not something new. I don't think some of the stuff he's making up. I think he honestly believes some of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And if you go back to, I believe this was just after Biden took office.
He was part of the 2020 election was not legitimate crowd. Yes.
Yeah, and
just like he didn't believe that Barack Obama was born in the United States.
And he's part of a group of former military leaders, which he's referring to a group of military leaders running Q, right? 124 former military leaders penned an open letter challenging the legitimacy of the Biden presidency, and was roundly criticized for having done it because
as they should be.
Yeah, because they're getting political, and it's sort of an ethical,
The United
problem.
States military does not swear to support and defend a single person. Like I said, I served 4 presidents, 2 of each party. I served under Presidents Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, and I retired under Biden. So the United States military, in the oath that we take, we swear to support and defend the Constitution. The Constitution, of course, has 3 branches of government. We support and defend Congress and the courts, as well as the presidency. We support the concept of elections, the fact that peaceful transfer of power, things like that. We do not swear, I never swore to support and defend George W. Bush, President Obama, President Trump, or President Biden. That's not how it works.
And Vallely is not alone. I can't say that any of these other generals were involved directly, or even, I don't know if they're involved at all in what he was doing with regard to Ottawa and the convoy specifically, but definitely over 120 involved in writing that open letter opposing the Biden presidency, and they're all part of an organization called Flag Officers for America, and that the number of officers, including a lot of generals and retired generals involved in this organization here, which Vallely is part of, has grown to well over 200. And again, for me, it's interesting to see that there's this constant reference to these military officers, around 200 or more, running Q that they always refer to. And then we see these organizations and the connection back to people like Vallely and Flynn. So I'm starting to kind of connect dots, whether that they should be connected or not. I guess people will have to make their own assessment.
There's a separate, the American military, like I said, there's certain rights you retain. Even when you're active duty, you can vote for whoever you want, things like that. But after you retire to a large extent, but not completely, you become just average, everyday citizen. But there's a lot of people. And you're talking about 180 and 200. And while from a certain perspective, that might sound like a lot of people, there are currently something like 2 million people in the United States military, if you count civilian employees as well, active duty. And if you start talking about the reserves and the National Guard, it gets even bigger. And those are the people that are active right now. So it's something like 7% of the United States is some version of a veteran, whether active duty or retired. That's 7% of 335 million people is a lot of people. So if you've got 180 people, that's a very tiny segment of the United States veteran population. There's a separate organization that I belong to, which is National Security Leaders for America, that they support things like the peaceful transfer of power, the rule of law. If somebody breaks the law, I don't care who you are, you're not nobody's above the law, that kind of stuff. Whether you're a veteran or whether you're a political office holder, you're not above the law. That's not America. So, yeah.
Just there's something that I've been picking up on for a long time, and it's taken me a long time to try to make any sense of it at all. But if you look at the title, the name Flag Officers for America with the number 4, there's a common theme there. And within freedom organizations, freedom groups, sovereign citizens groups, Freemen on the Land groups, it's a common thing. Many of them use the number 4 in their names. It took me a long time to kind of piece things together, but one of the reasons some of these groups are using that number 4 is because it makes a reference to Article 4 in the Articles of Confederation in the United States, which discusses the rights of free inhabitants. And it's also interesting that just within the past week, the Articles of Confederation, I believe it's Article 11, makes reference to Canada, which has been misrepresented and taken out of context entirely in videos saying that Canada is already part of the United States based on Article 11 in the Articles of Confederation, which, if you read it outright, it's kind of confusing, but they're telling people that it, with the approval of 9 states, Canada becomes part of the United States. But that's not really, it's not to say that Canada is. Canada was given an invitation at that time, especially Lower Canada, which was Quebec, to join the U.S., but the invitation to join was never realized. Even Quebec, or Lower Canada at the time, they remained loyal to Britain at that time. It's just a sidebar, but it's relevant because these videos, which are part of, I would say, an information warfare campaign to undermine confidence in the Canadian government and to convince people that our country isn't real, this has been part of it. And there it is, the number 4 reference to Articles of Confederation, going back to the Articles of Confederation to further undermine the legitimacy in people's minds of Canada, while Trump is threatening to annex the country, while we have General Vallely still engaging with freedom groups on the Canadian side, and and engaging to the point where they keep trying to recreate the Freedom Convoy so that they can go back to Ottawa and overthrow the government. Here's another part of the clip.
I don't know if you have another solution, but...
Yes, I have one solution, but you will not like it.
What is it? It's an easy one, but it's not a good one. It's not a good mine.
Us need to kill Zionists.
No. It's not a good mine.
Yes, we need to kill Zionists because Zionists is the cancer of humanities.
Yeah, and you didn't you confront the general with that?
I did.
And it was one of those things, if there's ever a real softball question, do you support killing the Zionists? That's a pretty easy question to answer no on. That kind of thing is very, you would think that normal people of goodwill would say, yeah, that's not me. And no, yes, I condemn that. And he hemmed and he hawed and he tap danced this way and that. And I'm like, holy crap, dude. Do you actually support this?
Yeah, so let me, I'll bring the clip up here for you.
I was about to say what's going on with the video right there.
Yeah, sorry, I brought...
That's all right.
Sorry about that. I brought the live feed in instead of the clip that we want, but I have it here now. So yeah, this is General Vallely when I asked him about that exact clip. And here we go.
Didn't play.
Oops.
James Bond. Do you
Yes.
read Ian Fleming, James Bond?
I don't know if I have it queued up properly. Yeah, what? She's James Bond's mother.
Ian Fleming.
Yeah, I think this is later in the
what was she called?
Yeah, I think I've made a mistake here. I'll tell you what, folks.
Right now.
This
That
is an
was
important
Storm's
clip.
mother.
I want to Ian Fleming. I want to make sure that we get the right clip. So let me take a very short break so I can get this queued up properly for you, because I want to give the general. I want to be very fair to him and let him speak for himself on this. So stay with me.
Greetings, brave mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, so I have it here. I was just queued up a little bit too early in the clip, but here we go.
Norm's been around a long time. He's dug up a lot of stuff, and he feeds me stuff, and a lot of it, I don't know.
I don't really. I would like to talk to you about something tonight that maybe you can help me with, but I don't really want. I'm a little reluctant because it's kind of putting you on the spot.
Yeah.
But I think it's important.
Okay.
And would it be okay if I did this?
Well,
you don't know, because you don't know what it is I'm going to do. It's about, and I kind of want to keep people safe. And I'll tell you, I'm going to lay it out for you. Your name does come up a lot. And before we came on tonight, somebody sent me a recording. And I know that you've been involved in the freedom movement to some degree, and you were, talking to people during the Freedom Convoy, and I totally understand. But since then, of course, you've been on podcasts, and within the community and certain portions of the community, people talk about you. They kind of put you up on a pedestal, and they think that you have a lot of power. I think maybe some of these people are a little delusional, frankly, and maybe they don't have a grasp of reality.
Yeah.
But to them, it is very real, General, and this is really concerning to me because they keep trying to recreate the convoy over and over again, and you're quite right. Some people do want the government gone, and they keep doing things that I think kind of put public safety in jeopardy at times. So last month, there was a group of people who were trying to do this again. And they were communicating on a secure radio channel. And somebody sent me a copy of the recording. And in this recording, your name came up. And they talk about a number of things. They were heading to Ottawa, to Parliament, to this is what they were asserting. I won't play the whole recording tonight, but they were going there to overthrow the government in their minds. Okay, so I'm going to play this little clip for you just to show you the seriousness of this, to show you how serious they are about it, and then I'll maybe get you to comment on this, and maybe we can, bring the temperature down a little bit after I play this for you.
And is this General, is General Paul Vallely is involved?
Yes.
Okay. So it means that there's going to be an armed movement at the end of it.
Exactly.
Okay. Okay.
But you're not supposed to know that. You're not supposed to do it to know that.
So they keep setting up camps, or so I'm apparently, around Ottawa. They keep going back. In this particular case, the authorities became aware, as I understand it, and they kind of blocked access, and the thing fizzled out again. There was a period at one point about a year ago, I think it is now, where police had to shut down downtown Toronto around the Ontario legislature because this kind of stuff was going on. And they have some of these people, and I hate to even talk about it, but my priority here, my mandate is to serve the public, to tell the truth, and to keep people safe. And when I hear people talking like this, I get very concerned.
Like you.
Oh, here, hang on.
I don't know if you have another solution.
Oh, here.
Okay, so you guys are going there the 27th. You'll be the savior of so-called Canada, standing your ground and thinking that you can have some kind of power. Actually, if you could tell me what's the real goal, I might be able to understand, but all of you is going to Ottawa on the 27th to claim what are the demands? Like, what do you guys want? That's what I'm trying to understand.
My goal is remove Zionists.
So when he says Zionists, what he's really talking about here, in my estimation, is to go to Ottawa and remove the members of Parliament who he sees as Zionists. That's really where they're going with this whole conversation, and he elaborates on it here.
I don't know if you have another solution, but...
Yes, I have one solution, but you will not like it.
What is it? It's an easy one, but it's not the good one. It's not a good mind.
Us need to kill Zionists.
No. It's not a good mind.
Yes, we need to kill Zionists because Zionists is the cancer of humanities.
And then the plan goes on beyond that, and I keep hearing this over and over again.
That's not me. You notice he had an accent.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
But the problem here, General, is that they think it is you.
I don't care.
Well, I care, and I think you could do us all a service here tonight. What would you like to say to them? I mean, just tell these people it's not you, I guess.
The only thing I've said is Canada needs a new, strong government. That's all I've ever said.
Yeah.
And they do. They need new leadership.
I agree with you. I think we do need a new government. And
that's the right of the Canadian people to do it.
Sure. So, I mean, can you help me out here? And
no, because it wasn't me. I didn't say that.
Well, I know, but you tell these people that that's not what you want them to do. I guess
did.
is what I'm asking you to do.
I didn't say that. The last thing I would do is try to get another government to have a coup and revolution. I don't use those words. relative. I do it in some articles, maybe, like we see what's happening in different parts of the world. But I have always said it's up to the Canadians. You've got to, if you want a new government, you've got to do it.
So, okay.
So maybe he just wasn't speaking as clearly as he possibly should have.
Yeah, and he was confused because I wasn't saying that it was him on the recording.
Yeah.
When I was telling him, he was confused. I was trying to tell him that people think they're taking direction from him, which is the case. They think that he's part of the. They think he's Q. They think that he is part of the white hat operation. That he's backing them up. That the United States is coming up here to save Canada, to liberate us, to back up whatever it is they end up doing. And
so maybe the fair way to characterize that would be maybe he did, maybe he did not repudiate that statement, but if he wanted to, he should be given the opportunity to give a clear repudiation.
And we can have him back on the program to clarify. And there are more things because there's more.
He certainly didn't endorse it.
No.
So.
No, he didn't.
And he kind of backhandedly said that was kind of sort of wrong.
But I think he has been involved in some coups, hasn't he? Through history? Or at least in psychological operations, which in various countries, because he served in like
he certainly advocated for them.
Yeah.
Including in the United States. So
he has used that kind of language, and he hasn't just said that Canada needs a new government. He said that we should be part of the United States. He has an article on his Substack. He says, and he's kind of in the interview he distanced himself from it, but the article says that Canada is just an orphan cousin of the U.S. and we should be part of the United States. He talks about bombing Mexico, running military operations inside sovereign countries. And
without, prefacing it by saying we'll work with the Mexican government to take down the cartels, which would be a far more legitimate way of going after it.
Of course, and the same here in Canada. I'm sure that our government would be happy to cooperate in combating the drug problem. You're not going to have any issues up here in Canada with that. But for some reason, it's turned into this a requirement that we do something or lose our country. Mm-hmm. We're going to get destroyed economically, or they're just going to have to take us over, or we need to be taken over because the Chinese pose this big threat to Canada. So I guess we have to let the Americans take us over first, led by Donald Trump and maybe General Vallely. It's ridiculous, frankly. And it gets more ridiculous, Mike, because he signed documents advocating for the overthrow of the government.
Mm-hmm.
I've got them right here. Let me see if I can get them up on the screen.
I was about to say, were you going to bring those up?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
While you're looking at that, I would suggest to you and your good listeners that there's all sorts of types of people that are retired American generals. One of the people that I follow a lot, fairly closely, is retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges. He's very knowledgeable, a lot younger than General Vallely. Sorry, General, I really want to know how to pronounce your name. There's a group that I follow that has ex-Trump people in it, but they're good people. General Dunford is a good person. I met him in 2018. There's Michael Mosley, a few other people. General Mattis is my favorite Secretary of Defense. He's a very good person. So don't just listen to the General Paul Vallely.
So this is one of the documents that I have in my possession, signed by him and others. Now, I don't think this carries like a lot of legal weight because I think it's just, it's not, I don't think it's lawful or legal. But in any event, he signs it. And the problem with this is that it, like a bunch of these documents that I have here, signed by him and others, calls for the overthrow of the government. And I'll show you why. So this one's called Notice of Systemic Failures to Protect Global Populations and Intervention. It mentions Justin Trudeau specifically. It goes on about this executive order 13848, which talks about, it really addresses that executive order, addresses the loss of the election in 2020 for Donald Trump and foreign influence in political operations or the politics of the United States. That executive order still remains in effect today, but for some reason they're using this as some sort of, I guess, justification for what they're calling for in this document and others. And it cites a bunch of different issues, from violation of indigenous rights, perpetrating genocide on First Nations peoples in Canada.
Because the United States doesn't also have an issue with that.
Yeah, talking about the doctrine of discovery here, of course, making reference to the history that led to, I guess, that. Then it makes references to the International Criminal Court to further try to bolster their position on these issues. Then it goes into the issue of the pandemic, the use of vaccines. Also, they talk about, of course, the drug problem right here. Again, using this as some sort of a possible justification for what they're calling for in this document, which I will get into. They talk a lot about, of course, Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum, the New World Order, blah, blah, blah. And then, I mean, they mention Klaus Schwab by name right there. They call for, in this document, delivered to a number of legal bodies in Canada, they call for certain people, from media people like Tucker Carlson to political people, to be protected. That, these people have to be protected, including Julian Assange, Brad Wozni, Jim Caviezel, the actor, from what was the Sound of Freedom movie?
He had a TV show, Person of Interest, and he's done a few things.
General Michael Flynn, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Jewish space lasers, Marjorie Taylor Greene,
and Major General Paul Vallely. You're compelled to protect all these people. Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
How widespread does Marjorie Taylor Greene's nonsense get into Canada?
Well, some people in the chat might kind of identify with her, but here's
just so you know the type of person that was on that list. Marjorie Taylor Greene, one of those, because California gets wildfires every year. They have wildfire season in California. There was one of them several years back where Marjorie Taylor Greene publicly was stating that those fires were ignited by Jewish space lasers that had shot down into the California forest to ignite those fires.
If you check the chat, you're probably going to have people saying that that's true.
For crying out loud. Okay.
I'm pretty sure. Just let me know.
Brian Howell said that NTG is pig slop. So, okay.
Yeah. Well, Brian is a little more grounded in many ways. He's one of the smarter people in the chat, that's for sure, and a friend of mine. Here, it says right here, this is really where, again, we've got a big problem. Therefore, in accordance with the evidence submitted in addendum of March 7th, 2023 to the International Criminal Court in case blah, 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 it says right here, we reserve the legitimate right to establish a civil military trusteeship over all socioeconomic entities of Canada. So what does that mean? It means that they're taking over the country, that the government is going to be removed, and they're going to place.
Well, they're going to establish martial law is what that reads to me.
That's exactly what it is.
They're going to seize control and establish martial law in a hostile military takeover.
That's exactly what it means. And it
I don't
goes into
think
more
there's
detail.
any other way to read it. That's what they mean.
That's what it is. And thank you for just making that crystal clear for people, okay? So that's what they're threatening to do. And again, I'll scroll up here and show you all the different organizations and government-related organizations that this has been delivered to, including many in Canada, okay? And this is all directed at Canada. And there are other documents that I have too, all very similar, but like College of Physicians and Surgeons of Nova Scotia, there are legal bodies as well. Just these documents delivered to a whole bunch of these organizations, and here are the signatures. Okay.
Did they put fingerprints on there?
They did, and I'll tell you why. It's because a lot of this they base on natural law.
Oh, the sovereign citizen.
Sovereign citizen stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
So while this document may not be taken seriously by courts, the reality is this is what it's calling for.
Out there.
These things have been delivered, and it is a threat to the government. It is an affront to the government, and they are signed, and General Vallely's signature is right on there, and there it is, right there. So he signs this, and he signed all of them that I have in my possession.
Stand Up America Foundation US.
Yes. So this is a problem. Because
there's a grammatical mistake in his signature block. Sorry. Yeah.
And there are other people who've signed this as well, including his co-host on one of the live streams they do, Mr. Wozni.
There's your sovereign citizen, self-identified government of Vermont.
So like, again, but normally I would not take this stuff seriously. I wouldn't give it too much weight because I would say, well, it's not legitimate. It's not a real threat, but it is a real threat. It's certainly a real threat now because we have a general who is in direct contact with Donald Trump, who is the president of the United States, who he has provided advice to, continues to provide advice and intelligence to, and has for years. He's within Trump's sphere of influence. He clearly has, in the past, and maybe even now, had some influence over what Trump thinks, what Trump does, what policies Trump adopts. Even now, his Operation Sinaloa, with regard to Mexican drug cartels, there are elements of that are clearly in play on the border in Mexico. There are clearly elements of what General Vallely has said in the past and currently about what he perceives to be a national security threat in Canada, and we're seeing Donald Trump play on that right now with regard to the fentanyl and the shutting down the border, all of these things. And it's all coming from a guy who, if you trace his involvement with Trump back, it goes right back to America First, even the phrase America First, which Vallely claims he's the guy who coined it and recommended it to Trump. He's that involved.
Well, and like I said, he's been heavily involved. There's a video that I didn't find until today where he's addressing a Tea Party leadership movement. That's where he called for the resignation of all the leaders of Congress to be replaced by Tea Party people. But yeah, he was trying to build a movement and trying to get the Tea Party to replace the old school Republican Party, which has broadly succeeded. You have some old Tea Party people that are now by the MAGA movement even considered, they've been accused of being rhinos. So the shift, and he's been it's certainly a part of it, a big part of it. I don't know how big of a part. There's other people involved. So whether he's been the core guy or not would be a different statement. But yeah, he's been heavily involved.
Has been heavily involved, and it seems like he's actually the guy who came up with the blueprint for the psychological operation that I'm seeing at work here in Canada, and it has been in many ways through different stages especially since the pandemic. It's been very active.
It's the playbook Russia uses too. In different words, the what I learned. So one of my jobs in the U.S. Air Force between the years of 2017 and 2023 was one of my primary duties was countering Russian disinformation, and we had to learn about it. And one of the things that I am seeing out of him and this movement is, and how he addresses issues is. Goes back to the FUD that I talked about before, the fear, uncertainty, doubt, and despair, but also a more colloquial, less official phrase, the firehood of falsehoods, where he just throws a whole bunch of stuff out there. And then if you try and go after each and every detail that he throws out there, you just go crazy. And then he's already moved on to a dozen different things while you were trying to counter his initial stuff. So how effective it is depends on the listeners and how willing they are to either accept at face value what he says or dig in a little bit. And all I can say is, as much as I hate this phrase, do your homework. I don't hate that phrase, but it's been used by people like the general. Do your own research is not what that's not what I intend. Do good, legitimate research, and actually find the things out. Don't give in to confirmation bias, where all you're doing is finding things that you agree with. Actively search out things that you might disagree with, because that's the starting point of legitimate research and doing honest homework, is the humility to understand that I might be wrong. And if I honestly follow the research, then I might find something that I disagree with but ends up being right. So that sort of intellectual honesty is what they don't want, if that makes sense. Certainly the operations like the Russians, they don't want that.
And again, here's what he wrote in from PSYOP to Mind War, which is part of the proposal on how to run psychological warfare proposal that he sent to the Pentagon. And he writes in here, because I went and I found it, unlike PSYOP, Mind War has nothing to do with deception or even with selected and therefore misleading truth. Rather, it states a whole truth that, if it does not now exist, will be forced into existence by the will of the United States, which is why they're trying to convince us that our country doesn't exist.
Quote back up. I know it's been up for a while, but your good listeners really need to tear that apart and realize how much of a pretzel is in relatively few words there, where he throws around things like truth and deception and tries to poo-poo them, but then he completely flips it on its head and says that we are creating the truth, not that what is going on is the truth. Does that make sense? Where this is a whole big old pretzel that he did. He's doing backflips and contortions, and I mean, he must have had the best yoga class on the world to get this twisted up in, what is this, 2 sentences?
Yes. So, it comes down to sort of,
look at the contortions there. This is the mental gymnastics here are just astonishing.
And here's the thing. I take folks. I know a lot of people are just simply not going to believe anything that I'm saying tonight, even though I'm showing you the general talking about it, showing you the documents, showing you everything that's been going on. This is like proof. Like this is proof, truth, his words, not my
His
words,
signature.
their words, his signature. This is what they've been doing. Okay?
His signature on a document that says that he wants to do a hostile military takeover of your country and declare martial law.
And reporting back to a president that he's had absolute direct influence over for many years, part of his circle of friends and advisors, a military advisor. And I take no joy in telling you this because it is true that, hang on a second here, I might have an issue. Just one moment.
If I'm still on, one of your good listeners came at me on Twitter, which is fine. I'm good for anybody coming at me on Twitter, but
sorry.
Yeah. So if you have any questions for me, I'm out there. Feel free to reach out and ask questions. Who I am, what do I do, what do I think?
Well, so I take no joy in bringing you this because it's not my intent here to smear the Freedom Convoy or try to discredit what the thousands of Canadians were out there for, which was to oppose what they viewed as government overreach, an overreaction to to the pandemic, where they locked people down, and a lot of people were very upset about that.
Which is a legitimate political grievance, domestic
Sure.
politics. It's a debate in the United States. I tend to think that in a deadly worldwide pandemic with something that was that contagious, that big measures were necessary. But then you can have honest discussion on, well, did that actually work? Those are legitimate questions. But then you're talking
point,
about,
and I just want to point out, okay, because I don't want people to think I'm here trying to attack the ordinary, regular Canadians that came out. And I'm going to show you, the good side of the convoy too, and the well-meaning, well-intentioned people like Pastor Henry Hildebrand.
This is what happens, and you see it right here. We are just so excited. So excited. I mean, listen to it. It's just beautiful.
And again, you see the police opening the way, allowing the truckers right in to Parliament Hill.
This is what happens.
Okay, so you got that. You've got, and of course you've got, let me pull the audio down on this because I don't want to get a copyright strike because there was music playing in the background. But, I mean, you've got this going on, right? So this was true, too. And, I mean, this happened. I remember all this, too.
So one of the aspects of this type of hybrid war that I've certainly seen this kind of stuff out of Russia is trying to harness internal political discussion, debate, argument into something that the foreign agents want to create chaos. They want to disrupt or overthrow or do whatever they can to harm a nation, whether that's the UK or Germany or Ukraine or the United States or Canada. There's all sorts of targets of these kinds of operations. But it is important to realize that they are trying to use a wedge, but that doesn't mean that some of the wedges that they choose to use don't have actual legitimate complaints from honest citizens. It's a separate conversation to be had.
So again, more than one thing can be true at the same time, and you can have more than one group involved in the protest as well. And that was absolutely the case in Ottawa. And because we have somebody like a U.S. general involved with one of the groups. A lot of things I think people have had trouble understanding. Why did the government do this? Why did they respond that way? And again, you can sit there and I'm afraid to look in the chat because people just don't want to hear what I know you don't want to hear me saying this, but our government probably didn't want to acknowledge General Vallely being involved if they knew, if they were aware. And if they weren't, they're certainly aware now, because it's a huge scandal in my view, because he shouldn't have been involved at all and shouldn't be involved on any level, especially right now. But he is, and so are others. And as a result of his actions, as a result of the actions of others, the government did see what they believed to be a threat to the country, to the existence of an attempt to overthrow the government. And as a result, we got this. Because this also happened, and I was very upset about it. I'm still upset about it. Even in the face of what was going on, I don't agree with the way the government ultimately ended up doing this, but this is what we got. But context is important. You know, and everybody's seen the videos of you know, police hitting the you know, the batons, the shots of the horse trampling the First Nations woman, the horse trampling her. But I have to say, I'm just going to come out and say it. The people who were there with bad intentions, they're as much to blame for that as the government itself, because if it wasn't for them, if they were not involved, there would have been no threat to the government. It would have been just the peaceful protest, which we just showed you. But there was the other element as well. And what those bad actors were doing was disgusting, because they were using psychological warfare, propaganda, and information warfare campaign, which we know how those things work, to convince thousands of people to come out, exploiting a really bad situation where a lot of people were very upset with the government already. They exploited that, convinced people to come out there, even with their children, and put them out in front to use us as human shields. And who ended up taking the beating? It wasn't people like General Vallely. It wasn't the people who were behind the scenes, lurking in the shadows, waiting for a moment when they could pounce and potentially overthrow the government. It wasn't them. They weren't the ones who took the beatings. It was ordinary Canadians. It was you. It was you. It was ordinary people who had no idea that any of that was going on. And even now, not aware. Many of them. But some of them are. And some of them don't like what I'm telling you, and that's why I get attacked here night after night after night, because they don't want you to know the truth. And if they don't want you to know the truth, and they've been lying to you, telling you that you shouldn't listen to this person or to that media outlet because all they do is lie to you, when in fact they've been lying to you as well, that should be a wake-up call in itself. It's not enough to just reject everything over here and pick a side over there. You have to look at everything in perspective, get a full picture to really understand what is going on. And it's much more complex than just one side versus the other, black versus white, especially when politics is in play, and especially in an environment like this where many things are true at the same time. And that is what has been going on. This was at the very center of this, it was rotten. There was rot, cancer. And you took the beating on the street for them, because they hightailed it out of there. They didn't stick around to get beaten. They let you take it for them.
So I guess if you really want to get perspective, I guess a higher perspective is the concept of where do rights end and duty begins would be one question. Or when what are the limits of your rights, where you have a certain right, but at some point it turns into criminal action. And this is broad strokes. This is talking about the legitimate people in that protest that had legitimate complaints, but if it turns into, or if they're being used as useful idiots, where are the lines there? Or General Vallely, who has a right as a retired general, but then when does that cross into bad action? It's one of the things that I mention to people is that rights don't exist in a vacuum, and rights are never without boundary. So the right to free speech is not without boundary. You can't, in the United States anyway, you can't threaten somebody with bodily harm. That's not protected speech. If you're in the military, you cannot give secret information to anybody. If you have a clearance, you can't reveal that information. There's very definite restrictions on your speech. So this whole concept of it's like a whole more of a broader civics debate, because right now it's under assault. That's kind of what you're getting at, is that the rights of Canadians to be Canadian is under assault. Mm-hmm. The rights of Ukrainians to be Ukrainian is under assault. There's certain influence operations in the United States that are trying to
the right for us to even exist
is
under attack.
The whole concept of what does it mean to be a free society is being twisted consciously by bad actors. And so that kind of, I'm not telling you what's right or wrong. I'm just saying that I think we're on that level of debate on these subjects.
And if General Vallely and Norm Traversy were acting in good faith in some way, why didn't the general just call up the prime minister and say, hey, you know what, I think that you should step aside? Why did he have to do it with phone calls to Norm Traversy? Why was all this going on in a secretive manner?
Why was he trying to generate public chaos?
Right.
Because one of the things that Russia certainly does is they try and generate public chaos, and their point isn't necessarily to push any domestic agenda like an American or a Canadian domestic dispute. Their point isn't to push any specific side. Their point is to generate chaos. So like the win would be that police horse trampling the protester. That's what they were after.
Yes.
That was actually their entire goal. That kind of a thing to discredit the idea of Canada being Canada.
That's exactly right.
And so that's what we saw. That's what we saw in Ukraine and continue to see. That is what some of the influence operations in the United States are trying to do and have done surrounding both the militia movement and the Black Lives Matter, to choose two of the more recent ones. And now it's Canada's getting more of a taste than probably some Canadians would like.
They let you folks take the beating in the streets so they could get it on video and then run it online to make the government look bad, so that you would get even angrier with the government that was trying to defend the country. That's the way it works. So they let you take the beating so they could use you for propaganda to show you getting the crap kicked out of you in the streets. And they let that Indigenous woman, that First Nations elderly lady with the walker, get trampled by a horse so they could get it on video and use it for propaganda. That's the truth. All right. So, now, the government did it. I'm not happy about that either. Shouldn't have done what they did, but they did it because you need to be aware why they did it. It's because of that.
You need to flip it around, saying, so if you are unhappy with your government, say you don't think Trudeau is doing a very good job, for whatever your reasons are. Like I said, I have my disagreements with Biden. I have my disagreements with Trump. I think Obama made some big mistakes. And I think things that I liked about all of them. But the thing that you have to do in this kind of a situation where you've got bad actors and behind the scenes and people that really are not acting in your best interest, go and put yourself in the Canadian government's shoes. If you were the leader and you saw this protest coming where there are legitimate Canadians expressing their rights in legitimate ways, but there's also these actors, and some of them are foreign, and they have expressed, as the general did in those documents that he signed, to we want to overthrow your government and declare martial law. If you're the Canadian government and you see this coming down, how do you think you need to act? How would you respond? Yeah. And for me, they tried to thread the needle, and it wasn't perfect. They tried to protect the legitimate right of free citizens in a free nation to protest, even though they're protesting against Trudeau, versus their sworn duty as the leaders of the nation to protect the nation, because that's their job.
And it gets worse. I'm not even done.
Well, I'm just saying that
I know.
Your good listeners need to flip that to actually
absolutely
understand what we're talking about here.
Sure. And they need to understand this. What if you think that the reason Trump is worried about, making Canada the 51st state and it's all tied to the drug issue? No, it's not. It's about the issues that flag officers for America are focused on. And one issue I would say mostly in particular, this one right here, the Keystone Pipeline. It's about the oil. It's about the natural gas. It's about the resources. It's about the wealth of Canada. And they're using right now the separatist movements in Western Canada, like Wexit and the people associated with that, and the separatist movement in Quebec, which is why you're hearing clips like this.
Okay, so you guys are going down to 27. You'll be the savior of so-called Canada, standing
right? And
like you.
Yes.
Okay. Is there going to be children over there?
Yes. And after this Muppet Show, we're supposed to go to get the Desmarais family.
What is that?
Do you know who is the Desmarais family? The Desmarais family is the most richest family in Quebec. This family live in Sagar, Charlevoix.
Okay.
They have very, very big mansion, and all politicians go there to receive his order. They take planes and they go there in the night.
Okay.
And they received his order there. And then they're going to go to Parliament and do some law.
Okay.
And all these fucking laws come from the Desmarais family. The Desmarais family is the biggest Zionists in Quebec. We need to remove, and us supposed to remove them in the last. So the last part of the movie is coming, so I will be there for this.
Okay.
But it's not now. It's at the very end of the operation. I cannot talk anymore about this, but
No, I don't want to know more.
Now, if you don't know, the Desmarais family, one of the most powerful political families in Canada, very, very wealthy, and these people believe that they just have so much power that politicians from all over the world kind of, the WEF crowd fly in there and take their marching orders from them. Anyway, part of the plan was ultimately to go to their home after overthrowing the government and round up the Desmarais family. And I've heard this before. So it's an ongoing thing, but more than that, it's about the Keystone Pipeline, which Trump is right now calling for again to be resurrected, to get that thing done, because that's about energy coming out of Alberta, which is really the key to all of this. That's why Alberta Premier Danielle Smith went down to Mar-a-Lago. That's why all the focus is on the pipelines, the oil, and Flag Officers for America, General Vallely. They've been focused on Canada, energy, the Keystone Pipeline, Alberta oil for a long time. That, folks, is really what this is all about. It's not about the fentanyl. It's not about, it's just not about that. The tariffs are another tool. That's part of it, but Trump wants Canadian resources. The people around him, the rich people, the oligarchs around him, people like Kevin O'Leary, who Canadian but living in the States, went to Mar-a-Lago with Danielle Smith. What's he invested in? All kinds of things, including pipelines, and wants to build that AI, artificial intelligence research center up in Alberta, which is going to suck up massive amounts of energy. Also interested in social media, wants to buy TikTok with a group of other investors. Talking to Trump about that, needs his approval to do it. Why? Because if you control social media, you can control the PSYOP, just like Elon Musk with X. That's why Kevin O'Leary wants TikTok, because that will make him extremely powerful and influential, not just in Canada and the United States, but around the world. Energy, information. It's all about power, money, influence, and even warfare. It's about taking over our country, absorbing Canada. You think it's not a real threat? Yes, it is. How will it play out in the end? I'm not sure, but I hope you're starting to see more clearly now tonight that it isn't just what you're seeing on the surface. And these people within the freedom movement who keep telling you, don't worry about it, it's nothing, he's just trolling you. They are, a lot of them, frankly, I think, part of the whole operation, because it's their job to disarm you, not physically take your gun away, but to make you just feel like there's not really a threat. Don't worry about it. It's the United States. And of course we're like, yeah, it's the America. They're our friends. Oh, it's Donald Trump. It's just him and his bombastic, bluster again. It's nothing to worry about. Oh, they're putting the tariffs off again for a few more weeks. No, this is a very real thing. And it's a strategy, as we're showing you here tonight. They've been working on this for years. Years. General Vallely is one of the key components in that, one of the key players. And it's not so much the United States that has been doing this. It's MAGA. It's Trump. It's the people around him. It's the people running the white hat Q military operation in the shadows. It's the retired generals, whoever they are. And I think I've got a whole list of names, but that's who's been doing this. That's who continues to do it. And now they're back in the White House, and they are in a rush. They are in a real hurry, if you haven't noticed, to get this thing done. They're at lightning speed. To Operation Warp Speed on steroids with the executive orders and the way that our country has been thrown into a whirlwind tizzy, the way that NATO is being broken apart, the way that Canada is being threatened, the way that the whole issue of the New World Order versus the other New World Order, we're being offered up two paths here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Two paths forward for Canada, possibly. I think there are three, but they only want you to see two. One is Canada, like Chrystia Freeland in the leadership debate for the Liberals said the other night. She says we need a new world order, which was an intentional turn of phrase because she wants to fight some sort of this existential battle with Trump on real terms and just be straight up about it. That's why she said it. That path is Canada aligning more with Europe, although in the minds of a lot of people, it's some conspiracy thing with Klaus Schwab and so on. But no, it's classical liberal values and the preservation of the values, all the things that Western society was predicated on, built on, being preserved by having Canada align with Europe and other Western countries that Donald Trump is alienating and pushing away because he is in alignment with this new world view that Putin has, where the United States will have its sphere of influence globally. Russia will have its Eurasian empire, and China will have its little slice of the world over there. And all the smaller countries like Canada are just going to be swallowed up, absorbed, because we don't matter. As Donald Trump said, he said that borderline between Canada and the United States is just an imaginary line that should just be erased. As they're trying to tell you every night, Canada doesn't exist. It's not a real country. That's what Norm Traversy does as the court jester, has been doing it for years. He challenges the very existence of Canada. That's why you keep hearing that we don't have this Constitution that is in my hands. But it is a real thing. And if people have infected your mind, telling you otherwise, that this isn't real, that it doesn't exist, it's an insult and it's cancer on the brain. We do exist, and this is a real thing. Canada is a real place. It is a real country because you believe in it. Any country only exists because you believe in it, because I believe in it. It is what we support. If you stop believing in a country, it ceases to exist because you no longer will support it. The people lose faith in it. That's what they want. They want to demoralize you. They want to disarm you and think there's no threat from this superpower that is now under the control of a man who has somehow become very authoritarian and is now subscribing to this new world view or a new world order that is carving up the world into chunks. And if you don't believe that it's not having an impact here, and if you don't think Canada is about to fall apart or that it's being driven apart, ripped apart by these issues, fueled by this information war, all you have to do is go take a drive down an Alberta highway right now where these billboards are going up telling the Premier of Alberta that their province should join the United States because it drives a wedge between all Canadians. It's fueling the separatist movement, which is the classic play by authoritarian regimes, superpowers that want to overthrow governments. You fund, you support, you promote anything that is disruptive to the government, especially separatist movements. And that's exactly what we saw in Ukraine, where, regardless of who you blame, the separatist movements, the separatist elements in Ukraine were armed and given the ability to rise up against the government
by Russia
to destabilize things there. And that's exactly what is going on right here. Now, and in addition to that, if you think that General Vallely is just a kind old man who is not a threat to Canada, keep in mind that he also owns an arms company. He's basically an arms dealer. He showed us that on the broadcast the other night. Why he decided to talk about his gun company, I'm not exactly sure, but maybe he was trying to make a few sales.
That's actually what I thought.
and who better to advertise to than people that you're trying to convince to overthrow their government, which would be you guys in the audience, which is why I'm coming out and saying what he wouldn't say the other night in really explicit terms, which is don't do that. It's a really bad idea. You need to stay peaceful, and you sure as hell don't want to overthrow your government because you're just overthrowing yourself. This is the third path forward, folks. Okay? Just say no. Refuse to participate. If people want to get violent, if they want you to go out into the streets and take some of these with you, just say no. Reject all of that. We don't need it. It's a trap. Many people will die. Now, he says he has to get government approval in the U.S. to sell these things to people. But you know what? The biggest problem with the Canadian border is gun smuggling.
It's porous. The U.S.-Mexican border as well.
Exactly. And where are those guns coming from?
It's guns coming from the United States and going elsewhere, yes.
Now,
the Mexican drug cartels have been armed by the United States.
Exactly. And I can tell you that I'm getting reports. All right? We know. You know what I'm talking about, folks. All right? Where are they coming from? Now, I'm not saying that General Vallely is guilty of anything.
Well, owning and selling guns is not a crime in and of itself.
That's right. And nor is it a crime to own an arms company. Nor is it a crime to be a general. Nor is it a crime to, put a picture of them up on the internet. But it is a crime when people smuggle them into our country. It is a problem. That's a real problem with the Canadian border. That's what we need to crack down on. That's what we need to plug up. It's our responsibility to secure our border on the Canadian side and prevent drugs and guns and any other bad things from coming into the country. It's our responsibility. And it's actually Donald Trump's responsibility to keep his border secure and prevent anything that he doesn't want coming into his country from coming in on his side. But he's trying to make it sound, he is making it our fault, our responsibility to take care of the U.S. border. And it's not right. It's flipping everything upside down. It's victim blaming. It's creating a problem for which there is no solution. So it doesn't matter how hard we try, no matter how much money we spend, no matter how many police officers we throw at it, no matter how many helicopters we have patrolling the border, we will never stamp out the drug problem. So he's always going to have that excuse to do whatever he wants. The bottom line here, folks, is just say no. If you want freedom, if that's really what you want, you're not going to get it from Mr. Donald Trump. Not like this. And that's not what's really being offered up here. Because there's no freedom in coercion. People are saying all we have to do is just have the election as soon as possible because Donald Trump is doing all this because he wants us to have an election. I don't care what Donald Trump wants. It's not his business. We don't have elections.
Canada.
That's right. It doesn't matter what Donald Trump wants. It matters what you want. It matters what's best for Canada, for the citizens, for you. Donald Trump is irrelevant. Who cares?
I would like to point out, because you were talking about different options that people might have, that we've been talking about, well, the general's been doing this and he's been acting like this and he's doing an influence campaign and all that kind of stuff. And I did recommend, well, maybe do your research, but there's there's another side to this, and you were talking about, well, protect Canada, don't help them destroy Canada. You can push back. So it can be, for me, two great influences in my life have been harnessing anger and harnessing humor. Harnessing anger can get pretty toxic and it can wear you out yourself. But sometimes humor is the best medicine. So I sent you an email earlier. I don't know if you saw that, where they renamed Mar-a-Lago.
I didn't see it.
And so you can push back. And I wanted to put this up just because it's funny. And sometimes laughter is the best sanitizer. But the best humor has this core of truth to it.
Okay.
It would have been late this afternoon, somewhere 5-ish. Sorry I sent it to you so late. I didn't.
No, that's okay.
Until later.
Yeah, it's just coming up in my email, so I'd have to download it.
Okay.
Or I can maybe bring it up over here. I can bring it up here. Here we go. To some degree, okay. Yeah, I've got it.
So yeah, somebody at Google Maps decided that they would push back against Donald Trump inside the United States. There's a separate story about one of the departments he was trying to fire everybody from. And somebody got into the system, and then all the TVs in the entire building. So we're talking about hundreds of televisions, like in the lunchrooms and the break rooms, and you know that.
There it is.
Yeah. So, but the one is, yeah. So somebody went in and renamed Mar-a-Lago Kremlin headquarters, because this is when he was starting to spout literal Russian propaganda points against Ukraine, lies. And the comments, which you can't see anymore, were funny as well. But yeah, so somebody decided to be a little bit more humorous about it. When they took over the televisions, they showed a video of it was an AI generated video of Donald Trump kissing Elon Musk's feet, and it was like this 2-minute video that was just on a loop, and they couldn't figure out how to shut it down. So they ended up having to send people around the building and unplugging the televisions because somebody decided they wanted to push back against this.
Mm-hmm.
So for my money, I think humor is a good way of doing that. But I think that if you do value your freedoms and all that kind of stuff, maybe push back. Do it legally. I think humor is a good way of doing it. I don't think violence is the answer except in extreme circumstances. I was military for 22 years, so on some level I do believe in violence, but it's never the first choice, and it's never the second choice, and it should always be the last choice. And most military people would agree with that, because when the violence starts, who gets hurt first? So most military people don't want to be there.
Yeah. And
so,
and
yeah.
I'm here to try. This is my job, is to try to prevent that. I'm here to use my voice. I'm here to also, folks, give you a voice here, as you know, as part of our community. And opinions can vary, and some people want to join the United States. I guess you're entitled to that opinion. Me, I want to save my country, and whatever happens, it should be our choice, but it should be a choice made freely, not with an economic gun to our head, with tariffs or sanctions or any other coercive measure. And it shouldn't be done in the fog of an information war where we're being subjected to a psyop to disarm us mentally and leave us vulnerable to making a choice or a decision that isn't of free will. That's not democracy, and it sure as hell isn't freedom. And we're being subjected to a whole lot of that. Now, what's the solution to that? That's for another discussion, a broader discussion, and that'll go on for a long time. But just be aware that that's also going on. I want to be free, and I want my country, and I want to be best friends with the United States. but I don't want to be the United States. Who's with me? I don't know. But Mike, I'll throw it over to you for any final thoughts you have tonight. I hope that this has helped to enlighten people and actually help wake people up with both eyes open tonight.
So last time I was on, I did the thing where if I had been alive back in the day, what would I have done? Would I have pushed back when it mattered? Would I have helped somebody when it mattered? One of the things about this conversation is that we'd like to think that if we had been alive back then, we would have done the right thing. We would have been wearing the hero's cape. We would have been on the right side of history. And there's the pithy answer of what you do now is what you would have done then. And that's how I ended last time. But if there's one thing, this conversation and some of the details we brought up and some of the concepts of there's more than one thing going on. There can be simultaneously legitimate protest and nefarious actors at the same time. That what you would have done then in the confusion of the moment, would you have made the right choice? Would you have had all the information available to you to allow you to make the right choice? Or would you have been part of the problem without even intending to be? So that's the whole thing where I'm saying, do your homework, figure this stuff out, know who the actors are, and read when the general puts out that mental gymnastics of a statement with his doublespeak and newspeak. I can't imagine a more Orwellian 2 sentences than what the general put up there. Doing the right thing is not easy. And if you think it is, you're kidding yourself. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you have to push back against people that you didn't necessarily think you were going to push back on. So, yeah, you want to do the right thing, but that doesn't mean it's easy.
And we have breaking news. And this is Canadian for all us Canadians. John from Alberta is on the line. And even though he's from Alberta, he's watching what's going on in Ontario tonight, where we have an election underway. And John Rimby from Alberta, bring us up to date. What's the breaking news?
Well, first off, Team Canada, Rickster. Alberta, we're always Team Canada. And love to my friend in Seattle because I'm part American. Breaking news worldwide. Doug Ford has been reelected, the Premier of Ontario. Confirmed maybe 10 minutes ago. Doug Ford's got 79 Ontario seats in the Ontario legislature. We have a different system than my friends in the United States. NDP come in at number 2, allegedly 24 seats, NDP. Liberals come in at number 3, 13 Liberal seats. The Green Party, I believe, with 2, and 1 independent. Breaking news out of Ontario, Canada. And we are not the 51st state of the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Hey, John, thank you for bringing us that update. That's very helpful. And I know everybody's going to be, tuning in for more details as things unfold. And that's the Ford government's 3rd majority in a row now. So that's pretty impressive. And
Rickster, this is a big one. My friend in Washington, I love you, I'm part American. Doug Ford took a big risk, and he came out against the 2,800-pound orange orangutan in the China shop. Very different strategy, different than Daniel Smith in oil-rich Alberta, 3rd largest oil reserves in the world. And Doug lost only 3 seats. He was sitting with another 24-month mandate of 83 majority seats. He's only given up, I think, maybe 3 or 4. Major win for Doug Ford. God bless him. You're better to know the person you got in there, Huge win. Huge win, my friend. And a great show tonight, guys. Great show. Thank you for for enlightening us, my friend. I know it's been some pretty nasty chat, Rick, and to my friend in the United States. I love your friend in the United States.
Mike McCarrick, yeah.
Mike, thank you for coming on, Mike. You got balls bigger than a brass monkey, my friend. In
I appreciate that.
Edmonton, Alberta, at minus 50. Yeah, I don't know.
Minus 50
breaking,
in Alberta.
Breaking news, guys. Good luck.
I'm not coming to visit you until maybe June or July when it's warmer.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, Rickster, I'll fly you up in the oil jet.
Yeah,
Miss
okay.
Sandy, I promised you a barbecue. Calgary Stampede.
All right.
Let's look for it. Love you guys. And remember, Mike, in the U.S., we always pray on the Maverick News family around the world for peace. Yes. Peace, peace, peace. Whether you're in Israel, Gaza, or you're Russia, Ukraine, we always pray for peace, my friend. Peace. Love you. Love your brothers and sisters.
Thanks, John.
God bless you. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye. And with that, folks, we're gonna wrap for the night. And for all you guys who are hating on me tonight that I'm not looking at in the chat because I'm afraid of you, I love you. I love you twice as much as I did yesterday. Okay, so don't shoot the messenger. I'm just trying to help, just trying to do the right thing, and that's why Maverick and the News Brothers created this little ditty. What do we call this one again? Oh, I can't remember. It's the Big Rig. It's called the Big Rig because Donald Trump was rigging things before. We just didn't realize it. He continues to rig things. He's rigging it all. He's trying to rig the convoy with General Vallely. He's rigging it all. He's rigging it all up for his oligarch friends so they can all get filthy rich off Alberta oil now, I guess. In any way, it's all laid out here in the song. If you didn't understand what we were talking about earlier, you'll understand it when you watch this. Love you guys. See you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern on the flip side.
There's a rumble on the highway, a shadow on the hill. Donald's back in the saddle, and he's rolling in for the kill. Elon bought him Twitter, paid $1 million a vote, said democracy's for sale. Let's get this country on the road. They're betting on the truckers, revving engines loud and clear. Rolling through the border, spreading chaos far and near. It's the big rig, the deal you can't refuse. Stacking votes with money, the whole damn thing's a ruse. Rolling through the north, now topple every crown. Trump's the king of 51, no maple leaf around. They're sending dollars up the highway, fueling big machines. A crew wrapped in a convoy, freedom painted on the scenes. Said Canada's a target, let the border start to fade. The 55th state is waiting, it's a billionaire charade. Elon's rocket shooting high while truckers storm the gates. Democracy's on clearance, it's a ghosts, and the tyrants hum their song.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.